Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest stories. And let us know where you're watching from by leaving your city or country in the comments below. Thank you for your support. The night Mark Reynolds called his divorce an upgrade, Emily Harper learned how quietly a heart could break in a room no one else could hear. It was 11:47 on a Friday night in Nashville, and her apartment still smelled like cardboard, lemon cleaner, and the cheap vanilla candle she had bought from a grocery store checkout line because the place felt too empty without something pretending to be warm. 3 weeks earlier, she had signed her name at the bottom of a divorce agreement with hands that did not shake until she reached the parking lot. 3 weeks earlier, Mark had walked out of the courthouse wearing a navy suit she had helped him choose years ago, the same suit he once said made him feel like a man who could win any room. And now, on her phone screen, he was winning another one. The TikTok opened with city lights behind him, gold and blue over a rooftop bar, the kind of place where cocktails cost $20 and everyone laughed a little too loudly to prove they belonged there. Mark stood in the middle of it, one arm around a blonde woman in a cream coat, his smile polished enough for a billboard. Someone off camera asked him how single life felt. Mark raised his glass, looked straight into the lens, and said, "Divorce was the best upgrade I ever made." The people around him laughed. The woman beside him covered her mouth like the joke was too funny to hold. Emily stared at the screen without blinking. The video looped once, then again, the same sentence returning like a door closing in her face. Upgrade. As if 12 years of marriage had been an old kitchen appliance. As if the woman who had packed his lunches, proofread his listings, answered client emails when he was too exhausted, and learned how to smile through his late nights had been nothing more than something he had traded in. Her thumb hovered over the comment section, where strangers were already feeding the moment. One wrote, "Looks like he leveled up." Another added, "Freedom looks good on him." Emily set the phone down on the small round table she had bought from Facebook Marketplace for $40. Across the room, 2 moving boxes sat open beneath the window. One was labeled kitchen. The other was labeled memories, though she had crossed the word out with a black marker after realizing she was not ready to unpack it. Outside, traffic hummed along the wet street, headlights sliding over the glass like pale ghosts. Inside, the apartment was so quiet she could hear the refrigerator click on. Emily did not scream. She did not throw the phone. She did not type his name or defend herself to people who only knew the clean, cruel version he had posted. Instead, she stood slowly, walked to the kitchen counter, and looked at her reflection in the dark microwave door. Her hair was pulled back, her face bare, her eyes red but steady. For the first time all night, she noticed the small tripod still folded beside the coffee maker, the one she had bought months ago when she thought she might start posting baking videos. She picked it up, opened its thin black legs, and placed her phone on top. The screen lit her face in a soft blue glow. For a long moment, she only sat there in the silence, hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee, the divorce papers resting on the counter behind her like a second shadow. Then she pressed record. She did not mention Mark. She did not mention the rooftop, the blonde woman, or the word upgrade. She looked into the camera as if speaking to one person sitting across from her in the dark and whispered, "My marriage ended, and tonight I realized I have been waiting for someone who left to tell me I still matter. I do not know who I am without being his wife, but I think I am ready to find out." The red recording light blinked. Her voice almost broke on the last word, but it did not fall apart. When she stopped the video, the apartment was still empty. The boxes still unopened, the city still moving without her. But something had shifted, so small no one else would have noticed. Emily uploaded the clip with no music, no filter, and one caption, "Day 1 after divorce." Then she placed the phone face down, turned off the kitchen light, and sat in the dark while the world kept spinning beyond her window. She did not know that by morning, strangers would begin to find her. She did not know that one honest sentence would travel farther than any insult Mark had ever made. All she knew was that for the first time since the courthouse, she had spoken in her own voice, and it had not disappeared. By sunrise, the video had found 312 people, and Emily Harper sat at the edge of her mattress staring at the number as if it were a message slipped under a locked door. The apartment was pale with morning, the kind of soft gray light that made every cardboard box look heavier than it was. Her coffee maker sputtered in the kitchen, sending out the thin, bitter smell of a day that had arrived before she was ready for it. There were comments now. Not many, but enough to make her thumb pause. A woman from Ohio wrote, "I am starting over too." Another from Arizona said, "Please keep going." A third simply wrote, "You are not alone." Emily read those 4 words 3 times, and the silence in the room changed shape. For 12 years, she had been surrounded by noise that still left her feeling invisible. Mark Reynolds had never entered a room quietly. Even in the early days, before the polished suits and luxury watches, he had carried himself like a man rehearsing for a future audience. Back then, Emily loved that about him. She loved the way his eyes lit up when he talked about building something of his own, how he would sketch business plans on napkins at diners off Interstate 40, promising her that one day they would not have to count every dollar before ordering dessert. She believed him so completely that she started building the dream beside him before either of them had a name for it. When Mark became a real estate agent, Emily was the one who took his first headshots in the alley behind their duplex because the brick wall looked expensive in the afternoon sun. She ironed his shirts on a $20 board from Walmart. She rewrote his property descriptions after long shifts at the dental office where she worked the front desk. She answered late-night client emails while he slept with one arm thrown over his eyes, exhausted, and certain success was just one more showing away. On Saturdays, she arranged open house cookies on white plates, lit candles in empty kitchens, and reminded Mark which clients had kids, which ones hated traffic, which ones needed to feel important before they made an offer. He called her his secret weapon then. He would say it at backyard cookouts, pulling her close with a grin that made people laugh. "My wife is the reason I look smarter than I am." Everyone thought it was charming. Emily did too, until the joke became a habit, and the habit became a truth he no longer thanked her for. The better he did, the smaller her name became in the story. His first big commission bought him a tailored jacket. His second bought a leased black SUV. His third paid for a downtown office with glass walls and a receptionist who called him Mr. Reynolds in a voice soft enough to make Emily feel like a visitor. Somewhere between the client dinners and award plaques, Mark stopped asking what she wanted. When she mentioned opening a small bakery studio, a place where she could teach weekend classes and sell pies made from her grandmother's recipes, he looked up from his laptop and said, "Maybe when things calm down." Things never calmed down. They only became more expensive. Emily learned to swallow her wants in small, tidy pieces. A missed class here. A canceled permit appointment there. A notebook of recipes pushed into the back of a drawer because Mark needed the dining table for contracts. She told herself marriage meant seasons of sacrifice. She told herself love sometimes looked like standing behind someone until it was your turn to stand in the light. But Mark grew used to the light, and when he finally turned around, he looked at her as if she were part of the shadow. The divorce conversation happened on a Tuesday evening while rain tapped against the kitchen window of the house she had spent years making beautiful. He stood beside the marble island, checking a notification on his phone, and said, "You stopped being the woman I wanted." No raised voice. No shaking hands. Just a sentence, placed between them like a signed receipt. Emily remembered looking down at the lemon towel folded beside the sink, absurdly neat, and realizing she had spent years keeping a home warm for a man who had already moved out in every way that mattered. Now, in the small apartment 3 weeks later, the coffee finished brewing. Her phone buzzed again. Another comment appeared beneath her video. "I forgot I was allowed to start over." Emily placed her hand over her mouth, not to hide tears, but to hold something fragile inside her chest. She had spent so long helping Mark become unforgettable that she had forgotten the sound of her own name. But strangers were saying it now, gently, like they had found her under all the years she had disappeared. Emily did not answer the comments right away. She read them with one knee pulled to her chest, the phone balanced against a pillow, while the coffee in the kitchen cooled untouched. It would have been easy to type something sharp about Mark, to explain what people did not see behind his rooftop smile, to tell the internet how many years she had spent making him look effortless. Her thumb even opened the keyboard once. The little white box waited for her, empty and tempting, a place where pain could become proof. But Emily had lived long enough inside Mark Reynolds' version of truth to know that defending herself in his language would only keep her trapped in his story. So she locked the phone, stood up, and opened the box labeled Memories. The tape peeled back with a dry crackle that sounded too loud in the quiet room. Inside were ordinary things, the kind no court paper knew how to divide. A program from their small church wedding in Franklin. A photo strip from a county fair, Mark grinning with powdered sugar on his shirt. A yellow legal pad covered in his early business goals, written in blue ink while Emily had sat across from him eating fries and pretending not to worry about rent. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was the small ceramic bowl her grandmother had given her before the wedding. It was white with a blue rim, chipped on one side, meant for pie filling and Sunday mornings. Emily carried it to the kitchen, like it weighed more than glass. Then she opened the drawer where she had placed her wedding ring after the courthouse and dropped the ring into the bowl. The sound was small, not dramatic, not final enough for everything it carried. Just metal touching ceramic in a kitchen barely big enough for one person to turn around. She set the bowl beside the divorce papers, then added the legal pad, the photo strip, and a folded towel to soften the frame. For a moment, she almost laughed at herself. Mark had once told her she cared too much about how things looked. But this was not about making grief pretty. It was about making it visible without letting it perform. She placed the tripod on the counter again. The morning sun came through the blinds in narrow lines, striping the cabinets, the papers, her hands. Before pressing record, she looked around the apartment. The borrowed lamp with a dented shade, the mattress still on the floor, the Goodwill plates stacked beside the sink, the single pair of heels she had not worn since the final meeting with the lawyer. Nothing looked impressive. Nothing looked ready. Maybe that was why it felt honest. The red light appeared. Emily took a breath and began softly, as if the camera were not a crowd but a chair pulled close to the table. She said she had spent the night reading messages from women who sounded exactly like her. Women waking up in new apartments, spare bedrooms, guest rooms, and houses that suddenly felt unfamiliar. She said she did not have advice, not yet. She said she did not know how to rebuild a whole life. But she could show one corner of it being rebuilt. Then she lifted the ceramic bowl and held it in both hands. "This was my grandmother's," she said. "I used to think I would fill it with pie dough and peaches and bring it to a table full of family. Today it is holding the last thing I wore from my marriage. Maybe that counts as a beginning too." She ended the video there. No music. No tears carefully timed for sympathy. No mention of Mark's insult. When it uploaded, she watched the spinning circle until the post went live, then placed the phone in the bedroom and forced herself to make breakfast. 2 eggs. 1 slice of toast. Half an orange. She ate standing at the counter because the table still felt too formal for a life this unfinished. By noon, the video had passed 10,000 views. By evening, women were stitching it with their own bowls, their own drawers, their own quiet beginnings. Emily sat on the floor beside the moving boxes, listening to the low hum of the air conditioner, watching strangers turn her silence into a language they all understood. For the first time, the apartment did not feel empty. It felt like a room filling slowly with witnesses. On the 4th morning, Emily woke to the sound of rain tapping against the narrow window above her bed, soft and steady, like someone asking politely to be let in. Her phone was face down on the milk crate she used as a nightstand. But even before she touched it, she knew the world outside her apartment had grown larger overnight. The ceramic bowl video had passed 100,000 views. Women had filled the comments with photos of coffee mugs, shoeboxes, dresser drawers, and kitchen counters where they had placed the small remains of lives they were learning to leave behind. One woman wrote that she had finally changed the sheets. Another said she had eaten breakfast at her own table for the first time in 6 months. Emily read until her eyes blurred, not from sadness this time, but from the strange weight of being believed by people who had never met her. That morning, she made a decision. She opened a blank note on her phone and typed 30 days after divorce. No plan, no brand, no pretty promise tied with a ribbon. Just 30 mornings where she would record one honest thing she did not want to do, then do it anyway. Day 1 was unpacking the box-marked kitchen. She filmed herself placing plates in the cabinet, wiping dust from a thrift store saucepan, lining up 3 coffee mugs as if they were small soldiers guarding a new life. Day 2 was walking 1 mile through her neighborhood before work, sneakers squeaking on wet pavement, her breath visible in the cool Tennessee air. She passed a bakery with warm lights spilling over the sidewalk and stopped longer than she meant to, watching a woman slide trays of biscuits into a glass case. For a moment, Emily remembered the old notebook of recipes packed somewhere under winter scarves and tax papers, and the thought did not hurt as much as it used to. Day 5 was eating alone at a diner near Music Row. She chose a booth by the window, ordered pancakes and black coffee, and kept her hands still when the hostess asked if anyone else was joining her. No, Emily said, and the word landed gently. Day 7 was harder. She found one of Mark's monogrammed cuff links in the pocket of a coat she had not worn since December. For 10 minutes, she stood in the hallway holding it between two fingers, a tiny silver reminder of every gala, every client dinner, every evening where she had smiled beside him while feeling miles away. She did not film her face that day. She filmed only her hand placing the cuff link into a padded envelope, then wrote his office address on the front with neat blue ink. The caption said, "Returning what was never mine to carry." By day 12, her videos had a rhythm. Morning light, quiet kitchen, one difficult task, one small breath afterward. People began waiting for them. They noticed when she bought a real table instead of eating at the counter. They celebrated when she hung curtains. They asked about the recipe notebook, and on day 18, Emily finally found it at the bottom of the memories box, its pages stained with cinnamon, butter, and the handwriting of a younger woman who once believed there would be time. She opened to her grandmother's peach pie and placed the phone on the counter. Flour dusted her fingers. The rolling pin knocked softly against the edge of the sink. The apartment filled with the smell of sugar and fruit, warm enough to push back the loneliness for an afternoon. When the pie came out of the oven, uneven at the edges and golden in the middle, Emily looked at it for a long time before laughing under her breath. It was not perfect. It was hers. That video reached 3 million views before midnight. Not because she cried, not because she accused anyone, because millions of people watched a woman reclaim one ordinary thing that marriage had asked her to set down, and somehow it felt like a door opening. Emily went to bed with flowers still under one fingernail, the apartment smelling like peaches, the city lights trembling through her new curtains. For the first time in weeks, she did not fall asleep wondering what Mark was doing. She fell asleep wondering what she might make next. The morning after the peach pie video reached 3 million views, Emily Harper found herself standing in the cereal aisle of a Kroger on the east side of Nashville, staring at a row of oatmeal boxes while her phone vibrated so often it sounded like a small engine inside her coat pocket. She had gone there for milk, brown sugar, and a bag of flour, simple things that belonged to simple mornings. But the world on her screen no longer felt simple. Her follower count had climbed past 200,000 before breakfast. Strangers were recreating her grandmother's pie in kitchens from Texas to Maine. Women were posting videos of themselves opening old recipe boxes, cleaning out closets, applying for jobs, signing leases, and walking through grocery stores alone with their heads a little higher. Emily stood under the cold fluorescent lights, one hand on the cart handle, and felt the strange fear of being seen after spending years becoming invisible. At home, the apartment still looked almost the same. The thrift store table stood near the window. The new curtains moved gently in the air from the heater. The ceramic bowl with the blue rim sat on the counter, empty now, washed and waiting for something softer than a wedding ring. But her inbox had changed. By noon, there were messages from local news stations, small brands, women asking for advice she was not sure she had, and people who wanted to turn her sadness into slogans. Emily deleted anything that sounded too polished, too hungry, too eager to make her pain marketable. Then one email made her stop. It came from a company called Warm Table Collective, a small American home goods brand based in North Carolina. The message was not flashy. There were no promises about fame, no pushy contract attached, no demand for tears on camera. The woman who wrote it said she had watched Emily make the peach pie twice, then called her mother. She said the company wanted to sponsor a short series about rebuilding a home after loss, but only if Emily could keep full control of her words. Emily read that sentence again. Full control. For years, control had been something Mark carried in his voice, in his calendar, in the way he decided which dream could wait, because his dream was always more urgent. The words on the screen felt like a chair being pulled out for her at a table she had never been invited to before. That afternoon, another message arrived from a man named Daniel Brooks, an independent podcast producer in Atlanta. His profile photo showed a calm face, silver at the temples, kind eyes behind dark frames. Emily almost skipped the message, expecting another stranger asking for details about the divorce. But Daniel did not begin with Mark. He wrote that honesty on the internet was usually loud, and hers was not. He wrote that her videos felt like someone opening a window in a room people were afraid to admit they were trapped inside. Then he asked one question: when did you first feel like yourself again? Emily sat back from the table. Outside, a garbage truck groaned down the street, brakes hissing in the rain. The apartment smelled faintly of butter and peaches from the night before. She looked at the question until something inside her softened. No one had asked her that. Not her lawyer. Not her former neighbors. Not the polite women from Mark's office who sent messages beginning with "hope you are doing well" and ending before anything real could be said. Emily placed her hands flat on the table and tried to answer honestly. She did not say she felt like herself when the videos went viral. She did not say it happened when strangers praised her strength. She typed that it began with breakfast. 2 eggs, 1 slice of toast, half an orange, eaten alone at a counter in an apartment she could barely afford. It began when she realized no one was coming to approve the way she survived, and she ate anyway. Daniel replied 3 hours later with no flattery, only a sentence that stayed with her for the rest of the night. That is the story people need to hear. By evening, Emily had accepted the small sponsorship from Warm Table Collective and agreed to a recorded conversation with Daniel the following week. She did not celebrate with champagne. She did not post a victory speech. She washed the dinner plate in her sink, folded the dish towel over the oven handle, and opened her recipe notebook to a clean page. At the top, she wrote "starting over is still a kind of making." Then she underlined it once, slowly. Somewhere across town, Mark was still living inside rooms built for applause. Emily was beginning to build something quieter, but every quiet piece had her name on it. For 1 week, Emily moved through her days with the careful rhythm of someone learning to trust good news without leaning too hard on it. The Warm Table Collective package arrived on a Thursday afternoon, left outside her apartment door in a plain brown box with her name printed cleanly on the label. Inside were linen napkins, a small maple cutting board, a cream-colored mixing bowl, and a handwritten card from the woman who had emailed her. "We hope this helps make your table feel like yours again." Emily read the card twice before placing it beside her recipe notebook. She filmed the unboxing slowly, not as an advertisement first, but as a woman touching objects chosen for a home that no longer needed to impress anyone. That night, she made chicken noodle soup in a thrift store pot, sliced carrots on the new board, and spoke softly about how rebuilding did not always look like a grand transformation. Sometimes it looked like buying the right size trash bags, remembering to pay the electric bill, or learning that silence at dinner could be peaceful instead of lonely. The video reached nearly 2 million views before morning. By Saturday, her follower count passed 500,000. By Sunday evening, Mark Reynolds finally saw her face on his own phone without searching for it. He was sitting in the leather booth of a downtown steakhouse with 2 clients and the woman from the rooftop video, whose name was Chelsea. The server had just placed a glass of sparkling water beside him when Chelsea turned her screen toward the table and laughed with surprise, not cruelty, but the careless kind of amusement that comes from not understanding the wound beneath a story. "Is this your ex-wife?" she asked. "She is everywhere." Mark took the phone with a smile already prepared, the same calm smile he used when a buyer insulted a listing price. But the smile thinned as he watched Emily in her small Nashville kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned loosely, stirring soup while comments poured up the side of the screen faster than he could read them. People were calling her brave. They were calling her graceful. They were asking where to buy the bowl, where to find the recipe, whether she would write a book, whether she would ever host a class. Mark handed the phone back before the video ended. "She always liked attention," he said, though the words sounded weak even to him. Chelsea raised one eyebrow, then looked back at the screen. "She does not seem like she is asking for it." That sentence followed him home. In the quiet of his new condo, where everything was gray, glass, and expensive enough to feel untouched, Mark opened TikTok and searched Emily's name. Her account appeared immediately. Emily Harper. Starting over, one ordinary day at a time. He scrolled through the videos with the restless irritation of a man looking for evidence that the world had misunderstood him. There she was unpacking plates. There she was mailing his cufflink. There she was baking the peach pie from the notebook he had once moved off the dining table because he needed space for contracts. There she was answering Daniel Brooks on a podcast clip, her voice even and warm as she said, "I spent years helping someone else become visible. I think I am learning that visibility was never the same as love." Mark paused the video. Behind her, Daniel listened without interrupting. That bothered Mark more than the words. No one in the clip mentioned him, but his absence had become a shape everyone could recognize. Over the next few days, he began watching from an account with no photo and no name. At first, he only observed. Then, late one night, after a video of Emily writing business ideas on a whiteboard crossed 4 million views, he typed a comment under the empty profile. Some people know how to turn divorce into a performance. He waited, expecting her to defend herself, to reveal that he still had the power to pull her eyes toward him. Emily never answered. Instead, the next morning, she posted a new video from the corner of her apartment she had turned into a tiny workspace. A whiteboard stood behind her with 3 words written across the top. "Healing takes work." She wore a simple blue sweater, no jewelry except the small silver bracelet her sister had mailed her after the divorce. She looked into the camera and said, "There will always be people who think your recovery is an act because they benefited when you stayed quiet. Let them think that. You still have dishes to wash, bills to pay, rooms to fill with your own name." Then she turned back to the whiteboard and began outlining her first online baking class for women starting over. By noon, the video had become her biggest yet. By evening, Warm Table Collective doubled the partnership. By midnight, Daniel sent one message: "Atlanta wants you for a live creator conference." Emily stood in her kitchen, reading the invitation under the soft yellow light, while soup simmered on the stove and rain tapped gently at the window. She did not know Mark had seen it too. She only knew that the life he once called small was beginning to echo far beyond the walls he had left behind. Atlanta met Emily Harper with warm air, glass towers, and the kind of morning light that made every window look awake before the city was ready. She arrived on a Friday with one carry-on suitcase, a garment bag over her arm, and the same blue-rimmed ceramic bowl wrapped in a towel at the bottom of her luggage because leaving it behind had felt wrong. The conference hotel stood downtown, 30 stories of polished stone and brass doors, its lobby filled with creators, brand managers, podcast hosts, and women wearing name badges that flashed under the chandeliers. Emily paused just inside the entrance, feeling the low hum of hundreds of conversations move around her like a current. 6 weeks earlier, she had been counting grocery dollars in a quiet Nashville apartment. Now a young volunteer with a headset smiled at her and said, "Miss Harper, we are so honored you are here." Emily almost turned to see who the girl meant. Then Daniel Brooks stepped from beside a registration table, wearing a charcoal blazer and carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. He did not hug her too quickly or act as if he owned any part of her moment. He simply handed her 1 cup and said, "You made it." The steadiness in his voice helped her breathe. Her session was scheduled for 3 o'clock in the main ballroom, a room large enough to hold more than 800 people. The title on the program read "How Honesty Builds a Movement." Emily ran her thumb over the printed words while standing backstage, listening to the muffled sound of chairs filling beyond the curtain. She wore a simple cream dress from a department store at Green Hills, comfortable heels, and the silver bracelet from her sister. Nothing about her tried to look untouchable. That was why she looked different from everyone Mark had once taught her to admire. She looked present. Across the hotel, Mark Reynolds walked through the same lobby with Chelsea at his side, pretending he had come only to support her marketing team. He wore a tailored gray suit and the expression of a man prepared to be recognized. Chelsea had a badge clipped to her blazer and a phone in her hand, already scanning the room for people she wanted to meet. When she saw Emily Harper printed across a banner near the ballroom doors, her eyebrows lifted. Mark kept walking as if he had not seen it. But he had. He saw her name in black letters taller than his hand. He saw people taking photos beside it. He saw a woman point toward the sign and say, "That is the creator who got me through my separation." Mark's jaw tightened so slightly only Chelsea noticed. Inside the ballroom, he chose a seat near the middle, far enough to avoid attention, close enough not to miss anything. The lights dimmed at exactly 3 o'clock. A hush spread across the room. The host stepped onto the stage, introduced the session, and began listing Emily's work: the 30-day series, the baking classes, the partnership with Warm Table Collective, the community of women rebuilding their lives one ordinary day at a time. Each phrase landed heavier than Mark expected, not because it accused him, but because it did not need him. Then the screen behind the stage lit up with a still image from Emily's first kitchen video. A plain counter, divorce papers, a chipped bowl, morning light across her hands. Mark remembered that bowl. He remembered moving it aside one night because he needed room for contracts. He remembered saying, "Not everything has to be sentimental." The host smiled and said, "Please welcome Emily Harper." The applause rose before Emily appeared, not loud in a wild way, but deep, full, grateful. She stepped through the light and onto the stage with both hands relaxed at her sides. For 1 second, she saw only brightness. Then her eyes adjusted, and the room came into focus row by row. Women standing, phones raised, Daniel near the side wall, watching quietly, and Mark, seated halfway back, motionless beneath the blue wash of stage light. Emily did not stop. She did not look away either. Their eyes met for less than a breath, long enough for him to understand that she had seen him and chosen peace anyway. Then she turned to the microphone, placed her notes on the clear podium, and smiled at the crowd. The room settled around her like a held breath. Emily looked out at 800 strangers who somehow felt less foreign than the man who had once shared her last name. And she began with the truth, soft but unshaken. "I did not start recording because I was brave. I started because my apartment was too quiet, and I needed proof that I had not disappeared." Emily did not tell the room everything. She did not tell them about the nights she had slept with the television on because silence felt too large, or the afternoon she had sat in her car outside the grocery store until her hands stopped trembling enough to push a cart. She did not tell them how many times she had almost answered the cruel comments from Mark's empty account, or how often she had wanted to prove that she had been more than the woman he left behind. Instead, she told them what healing looked like when no one was clapping. She told them about taking out the trash alone in the rain, about learning which bills were due on the first of the month, about eating pancakes by herself without apologizing for the empty seat across from her. She spoke of the ceramic bowl, the recipe notebook, the pie that came out uneven and still felt like a miracle. In the middle rows, Mark sat with his hands folded too tightly in his lap. Every sentence seemed gentle until it reached him. Emily never said his name. That was worse. A room of 800 people understood the shape of what had happened without needing the person responsible to be identified. The screen behind her changed to a collage of videos from women across the country. A nurse in Des Moines painting her apartment walls pale green. A mother in Phoenix putting together a bookshelf. A teacher in Vermont kneading dough at dawn. A woman in Florida placing her old house key into a jar labeled finished. Their faces were not polished. Their kitchens were not perfect. Their voices cracked sometimes. But the room watched them with the kind of attention people usually reserved for heroes. Emily stepped away from the podium and let the silence sit before speaking again. She said she had learned that starting over was expensive in ways people did not always see. It cost deposits, legal fees, moving trucks, childcare, counseling, new work clothes, and the courage to ask for help after years of pretending everything was fine. Then she turned toward the screen as Daniel walked onto the stage carrying a small envelope. He did not touch her shoulder. He did not take the moment from her. He simply stood beside the podium and announced that Emily's community, with Warm Table Collective and hundreds of small donors, had raised funds to create the Blue Bowl Project, a grant program for women rebuilding after divorce. The number appeared behind them in clean white letters. $1,140,000. The room rose before Emily could speak. The applause came like weather, full and warm, rolling from the front rows to the back until even the chandeliers seemed to tremble with it. Emily covered her mouth for half a second, not to hide, but to hold herself steady. Mark stared at the number as if it were printed in a language he once thought only he could read. He had measured worth in closings, commissions, offices with glass walls, cars with leather seats. He had called her life small. Now the small things had gathered into something larger than anything he had built with his name on the door. Chelsea looked from the screen to Mark, and for the first time since the rooftop video, her expression carried no admiration, only understanding. Emily returned to the microphone when the applause softened. Her voice was quieter than before, but every person in the room leaned toward it. She said the first grant would help a woman in Tennessee cover a security deposit and 3 months of groceries while she began a new job. The second would help a mother in Ohio pay for certification classes. The third would fund counseling sessions for women who had spent too long being told their pain was an inconvenience. Mark lowered his eyes. There was no accusation on the stage, no revenge speech, no dramatic collapse of his reputation. There was only Emily, standing in a cream dress under the lights, turning the private language of loss into shelter for strangers. When the session ended, people moved toward her with tears, with business cards, with stories pressed carefully into both hands. Emily listened to each one as if she still remembered what it felt like to be unheard. Across the ballroom, Mark remained seated until the row behind him emptied. On the giant screen, her name stayed glowing above the words founder, creator, advocate. He had once waited for her to fade. Instead, she had become impossible to ignore. After the ballroom emptied, Emily stood near the side exit with a paper cup of water in one hand and the blue-rimmed ceramic bowl in the other, wrapped again in the towel from her suitcase. Her feet ached from the comfortable heels that were only comfortable for the first hour, and her voice felt rough from answering women who had come to her with stories folded carefully inside quiet smiles. Outside the tall windows, Atlanta had turned gold with late afternoon light, traffic moving below in silver lines, horns rising faintly from the street like a city. Clearing its throat, Daniel waited a few feet away, giving her room, speaking with the event coordinator about the next steps for the Blue Bowl project. Warm Table Collective wanted to continue. 2 national sponsors had asked for meetings. A foundation in Tennessee had offered office space. The kind of opportunity that once would have made Emily look around for Mark, waiting for him to decide whether it was practical, now settled in her own hands. She was tired, but she was not afraid of the wait. When she turned toward the elevators, Mark was standing at the end of the hallway. His gray suit still looked expensive, but something about him had lost its polish under the hotel lights. Chelsea was not beside him. He held his phone loosely, as if he had forgotten why he had taken it out. For a second, neither of them spoke. The hallway carried the softened sounds of the conference behind them, rolling carts, distant laughter, the low murmur of people leaving with new numbers in their contacts and new ideas in their heads. Mark looked at the bowl in her hands, then at her face. "I did not know you were building all of this," he said. Emily studied him the way a person studies a house after moving out, recognizing the windows without feeling the need to go inside. "You did not ask," she said. He swallowed, eyes shifting toward the ballroom doors where her name still glowed on the screen beyond the gap. "I saw the comments," he continued. "Some people think I was the villain in your story." Emily felt no rush of anger. That surprised her. Weeks ago, that sentence might have pulled every old defense out of her, every receipt, every memory, every night she had made herself smaller so he could stand taller. But the woman standing in the Atlanta hallway had already used her breath for better things. She adjusted the towel around the bowl and answered quietly, "I did not make you look like anything, Mark. I just stopped protecting your version of what happened." The words landed without force, and because of that, they stayed. Mark looked down. For the first time, Emily saw not power, not charm, not the man who could win a room, but a person facing the emptiness applause could not fill. She did not soften the truth to rescue him from it. She had done that for too many years. "I thought you needed me," he said, almost to himself. Emily nodded once, not in agreement, but in farewell to the woman who used to believe the same thing. "So did I," she said. Then she stepped past him. Daniel saw her coming and opened the glass door leading toward the hotel entrance, but Emily reached it first and pushed it open herself. Warm Atlanta air moved around her, carrying the smell of pavement, coffee, and rain left behind from a storm that had already passed. At the curb, a black car waited, its windows reflecting the sunset in long copper streaks. Her phone buzzed again and again inside her purse, but she did not check it. Not yet. For one small moment, she stood under the hotel awning and let the city see her without needing to perform strength for it. Behind her, Mark remained in the hallway. Ahead of her, Daniel carried a folder filled with names of women the grant could help first. Emily placed the ceramic bowl carefully on the car seat beside her, no longer a shrine to what was lost, but a vessel ready to be filled. As the car pulled away from the curb, the conference hotel slipped into the rearview mirror, bright and distant. Emily watched it shrink without sadness. Her marriage had ended in a courthouse. Her voice had begun in a tiny kitchen, and her future was now moving through downtown Atlanta with the windows catching the last light of day. She had not won him back. She had won herself, and the world had simply arrived in time to witness it.